WhatsApp. It's the largest chatting app on the planet, now owned by Meta, and there's no translator built into the app. So for me, I was always copy and pasting. Someone would write something in Portuguese, would write it in Russian, going back to Google Translate, and then copy and pasting the messages back into WhatsApp. I mean, it's tiring. So we built our own translation function within the chat, where if I send a message outwardly in whatever language I choose, I can translate that message in real time to the target language of the other person. If they speak 7 languages, I could choose between one of the 7. And if they're writing to me in a specific language, I can translate to one of the hundreds of languages we have on the platform. So there's really no communication barriers.
Hello, welcome to EdTech Leaders. Today we have Alexander Max Kaplan, the founder and CEO of Linguado. Welcome.
Thanks, Oliver. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. So tell us, who does Linguado serve and how do you help them?
Linguado serves the world. We started out as a free language and cultural exchange platform. My original mission and all the altruistic missions in which I was thinking about in creating this product primarily were to, one, prevent language extinction, two, provide free language access to the world. So for people that study language, they study culture, but maybe don't have the financial resources, the passport, the visa to leave their country and go to their target country and or country in which serves the language they're trying to become a speaker of, we bring the world to you, right? So primarily it's people in the language space that are looking to learn languages. It's people that are very interested in having a cultural exchange. It's people that have really just been hitting their heads on the wall after taking 10, 15 plus years of a language course, or they're using a product like a Duolingo, a Babbel, or Rosetta Stone, and they realize that it's not good enough if they don't have native speakers to practice with. So we originally started as a social, let's call it like a social network for language and cultural exchange, opening the doors of communication between the world, really eliminating borders and allowing free communication between users, whether it's in your vicinity or worldwide. That's how we started, and we, as like any founder in any product, we've pivoted along the way and added on top of that. But that was the initial framework and idea for building this.
So what does the app look like now? Like, what can you do? How do people use it? So there's the cultural exchange part. How do people talk to each other? Just tell us about some of the things you can do on the app.
So the first feature that we wanted to create and did create was the map, right? And it's been good confirmation bias for me because Instagram, most popular social media app on the planet, now implemented a map. Visually, it's very striking to see flags, our user base all over the world. So if you want to filter, I lived in Brazil for 7 years. I speak Portuguese. I have no reason to practice it at this point because I'm fluent. But if I just wanted to find Brazilians around me here in Miami, I can filter by nationality, the languages people speak, search by proximity or worldwide. So I would say the map feature is our most visually stimulating and most beloved feature by our users. And to be honest with you, I got a lot of let's say not so good criticism from the team that I was working with about implementing it, because many people thought no one wants to see their location, no one wants to share it. It's completely up to the user. The users have that right to have their location on or off, right? And aside from that, of course, it's the chat. One thing, and one of the main reasons I've been able to learn so many languages through my immersive mentality which is communication rather than taking traditional courses or traditional pedagogy for language learning. WhatsApp, it's the largest chatting app on the planet, now owned by Meta, and there's no translator built into the app. So for me, I was always copy and pasting. Someone would write something in Portuguese, would write it in Russian, going back to Google Translate, and then copy and pasting the messages back into WhatsApp. I mean, it's tiring. So we built our own translation function within the chat, where if I send a message outwardly in whatever language I choose, I can translate that message in real time to the target language of the other person. If they speak 7 languages, I could choose between one of the 7. And if they're writing to me in a specific language, I can translate to one of the hundreds of languages we have on the platform. So there's really no communication barriers. I mean, I think like any founder, you want to have all the tools and resources to keep users on the app without having to leave for whatever their mission is. And in our case, it's communication.
So if someone isn't interested in learning a language, but just interested in the cultural exchange part, they could use the translation services. That's one part of your user base. And then if they want to learn languages, they could just use the translator to kind of help them out as they're learning, right? How many people are the majority on to learn a language, or how many are on just to speak to people in other countries?
Yeah. So the focus, our target user are language learners. People that have exhausted tools and resources trying to learn languages and realize that if they don't converse with native speakers, they're not going to achieve fluency. So that is our target audience. What we have realized is that a big driver for our growth and stickiness is actually loneliness. People that live in remote parts of the world, they don't have access maybe to Western culture. One thing that we do, and that it's been an organic, let's say, a product of what we've built, is created with this open communication. We've trumped a lot of stereotypes that exist in the world. So just open communication. Some things I can point out are, you know, I- during the height of BLM, Black Lives Matter, we had an influx of Africans wanting to speak to Black Americans on our platform to understand what it's like to be Black in America. Right now, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, we see peaceful conversations between Israelis and Palestinians. The war in Ukraine, we even created a pen pal program with a school in North Carolina, actually through a program called X Culture, which we participate in every year, which allows university students from all over the world to kind of use Linguado as their guinea pig um, company that they study, because most of the students are international business students. And one thing that the program was really passionate about during when the war started with Ukraine was pairing Ukrainians with Americans so they could practice English and get their mind off of the war. So a lot of this open dialogue has led to peace, and you realize that what you see on TV, um, that's a form of news, but the real news is actually talking to the people in that particular location. And that's been a really cool, nice byproduct of what we're building. And I mentioned this at the beginning, language extinction is something that I'm very passionate about. There's studies shown that language dies every 2 weeks. So if we know of a language that is running out of gas, they're losing its population of speakers, we add it to the platform. We really try and promote it because I do want to keep languages alive. And I'll just say that the last trip I did to Brazil was to go to the Amazon to meet with indigenous tribes and understand all the languages that are on the verge of language extinction, that on the verge of dying. But because the Amazon has been, so now has infrastructure. They all have smartphones and whatnot. Well, we'll add those languages to the app.
So it sounds like um, most of the people are most of the people are using chat or speaking across countries. How many people are meeting in person?
So another thing I should mention that dating has always been a side effect of our platform, right? And if done in good taste, I think it's a nice side effect. We don't promote ourselves as an international dating app, but to our that we know about, there have been seven, not just relationships, but marriages that have actually occurred because of people that have met on the platform. So, and even for me, the first time my big motivator for learning Spanish when I was 15 was because I fell in love with a girl from Madrid and her English wasn't that good. I did a foreign exchange program in high school, and my mission was to become a fluent Spanish speaker so that I could conquer love. I think that's a mission, that's a motivator for a lot of people that do learn languages. And in our case, I'm not going to say we had a bunch of 90-day fiance situations, but we had a girl from Brazil get married to a guy from Texas, a girl from Indonesia get married to a guy from the UK. The list goes on, and these are the only ones that we know about. Now the platform has expanded and we're a platform that builds based on what the users want. So we understand that, not every communication or link between two users is going to be symbiotic, right? Just because the Indian person wants to practice his English with me doesn't mean that I want to practice Hindi or another one of the 100+ Indian languages, right? So what's my benefit? That's a tricky question for us, right? We say, hey, okay, we can either create a tool like let's call it, an Airbnb or Uber in the language space, where if relationships are not symbiotic, maybe you can charge another user for a conversation or some sort of language service. The company would take a percentage on that transaction between buyers and sellers. We've not implemented that yet. One thing that we are currently implementing right now are group chats, and they're group language chats. So if a person from India or Pakistan or Algeria wants to practice a certain language, but users are not accepting their request, then they can enter a language classroom and get in a group setting and get exposure to the language they want. Those are going to be called language tribes. And every week we'll have a different mission or focus. So like this week could be football, next week could be food, gastronomy, etc. So that's something we're building out. We also built out, we noticed that roughly 20 to 25% of our users travel a lot. We have a ton of digital nomads. So we built out an entire travel and culture section where people do not need to be social on the platform. And that steers away from our original mission. I mean, the Wall Street Journal designated us as a social version of Duolingo. Well, yeah, that's true. That's what we started as. But now we have a culture and travel section where if I just want to, let's say I'm going to Brazil for next week, I in real time will see the FX rate, dollars to Brazilian real. I'll see information about the country. We just partner with Expedia so I can find out where to stay, how to get there. It'll be cultural information about the country. Yes, you will still have the opportunity to get in touch with locals, which we are setting the footprints for possible, let's say, tour guides, Airbnb type experiences, let's say, people that want to meet up in person, because it does happen a lot. And one of the things that I think classrooms and these other language learning tools really lack is what people are actually saying. They don't teach English American New York slang when you're taking a class for English in another country. We have slang phrases on the app. So in this culture section, it's called Discover. We have phrases, verbs, and slangs. The slang phrases are actually what users provide us. We have a group of what we call moderators on the platform They're kind of like Linguado evangelists. They're our super users. So many of them will come and work or volunteer their time to be a part of what we're building. They'll collect feedback from our users, say what they like, what they don't like. They'll report bugs. They've also really helped us with growth to expand in their countries. We have users from all over the world that volunteer. But one of the things that they're doing is also collecting slangs from our users. So, if I want to know all the top 20 slangs in Indonesia, they're there. They're on our platform. Spanish, of course, is spoken in 20 plus countries. So we'll have Spanish slangs from Argentina, specific to Colombia, Mexico, and so on. I think that's very unique and users appreciate that.
How for you, how did this happen? How did you start Linguado? What was your background?
I do not have a tech background. I've never written a line of code in my life. Now I can because of AI. So I knew that I needed a technical better half. I think there were three light bulbs that I experienced that really set off the alarm in which I had to build something like this. So without going too deep into my life story, because it really started from when I was a kid. The first language I learned was Hebrew. Studied it for 10 years. Then I switched to Spanish. After Spanish, I started studying Russian. I always had an interest in language. And I started realizing early on, if you have a base, right? Okay, so in my case, Spanish was my Latin base, right? Hebrew, maybe easier to transition to Arabic at some point. If I have Russian, it's a Slavic base, then I can transition to maybe a Serbian or a Croatian, other languages that use the Cyrillic alphabet, Slavic languages. So I've always been able to see the comparisons and similarities between language families. Many people don't have that talent, but when there's a will, there's a way. I was obsessed with language and culture early on, but Linguado for me was just solving problems that I saw or experienced as someone interested in language, culture, communication, and someone who lived abroad in many different countries. I mean, the WhatsApp example, it's got, I'm probably at least a billion users at this point. They don't have a translator. Wow. It makes no sense to me. So I get frustrated having to copy and paste back and forth to Google Translate. Well, that's one thing. Let's create a chatting app that doesn't have to have you leave the app. When I lived in Brazil for 7 years. And I remember in 2016, this was one of my biggest light bulbs. At the Olympics, Rio 2016, the opening ceremony, there were two lines of people to get into the Maracanã Stadium, which is where they had the opening of the Olympics. The majority of the people that went to the opening ceremony were either wealthy Brazilians or foreigners because it was a very expensive ticket. And there were two lines to get into the stadium. I saw the guy who working the event on his microphone, and he was like, essa fila aqui tem duas filas, as pessoas que têm bolsa e as pessoas que não têm. No, basically what he said is there's two lines to get into the stadium, people that have bags and don't have bags, and everything is mixed up. He's saying this in Portuguese. Looking around, no one's Brazilian in the lines there. And I'm like, yo, dude, you got to say this in English. No one understands you. And he's wondering, yeah, why is no one listening to me? I'm like, because they don't speak Portuguese, right? And he's like, do you speak English? I'm like, yeah, I'm talking to him in Portuguese. I'm like, yes, of course, I'm American. I'm like, give me the microphone. So I'm like, this line is for people that have bags. This line's for people that don't have bags. And it was just, and everyone moves around. And I'm like, gosh, man, so much money pumped into this event. They can't hire bilingual people to run it.
Mm.
And that's a big problem with Brazil. It's the fifth biggest country on the planet. And it's roughly, if you really look deeper into the statistics, they may say somewhere between 3 and 5% English speaking. It's under 1%. Under
Mm.
1% of people that are actually true English speakers. The education for language in Brazil is terrible. And this is not an outward, let's say, biased or unbiased opinion by someone who's not Brazilians will tell you that. So they need, and anyone who wants to learn English, if they have the funds to do it, they have to go to private schools for it. They will not learn it in school. They need to go to a private school. Also, the issue with going to private school is the teachers are not foreigners, they're Brazilians. Nothing against a Brazilian teaching you English, but I don't want to learn Portuguese from an American. I want to learn it from a Brazilian. You know, that's a big flaw with the language learning process, is also learning for people that are not native speakers. And those are the ones that you're trying to teach you. And they don't know our slang, right? So that was one issue. And I started looking deeper into the statistics. I remember later that year in 2016, I had left Brazil and gone to Europe. And I met up with my French, she's Parisian, friend who I had met in Brazil. She happens to like Brazilian guys. She doesn't like French guys. And I remember we were on the subway, the metro in Paris, and she's on Tinder. And she's like, oh, these Parisian men, like I wish there was a way I could find only Brazilian men here in Paris. I'm like, yeah, you can't filter by nationality specifically and by location on dating apps either. So that kind of light bulb went off. It's like, I want to solve her problem. She just wants to find Brazilian guys. She doesn't want to see all the French men. Well, can't do that on dating apps. So, okay. And then later, this is the last light bulb that set this up. Like, I have to build this product. On that Euro tour that I was on, just backpacking through Europe, I got invited to go to Romania for a few days with some buddies of mine from the US. They were just looking to party in Bucharest and the Romanian countryside, a place called Mamaia. Now, all I knew about Romania was really Dracula, Transylvania. Um, I didn't know much about the country. It's a wonderful country. It's beautiful. I won't say I'm an Andrew Tate fan, but the things he said about Romania are true. It's an incredible country, very huge country that most Westerners just don't know much about. And I will say, interesting fact, it's also a Latin language. People forget that Romanian is a Latin language, just like a Spanish, Portuguese, Italian, French, Catalan. So I was at the airport and I was like, I had 8 hours to kill. I had a layover in Frankfurt. And I was saying, you know what? It would be cool if I could get in touch with a Romanian person in Bucharest before I arrive, learn some phrases, find out where to go, what to do. And I just couldn't think of any social platform that would allow me to find that person, right? So here we are. I said, I'm going to create this. And in order for me to create it, I didn't know where to begin. I just knew that I needed to find someone that had that technical knowledge, because where I lie is product. I know that I'm a salesperson. I can raise money if I need to get it. I have my language background. I worked also on the sales side for a company called TransPerfect. It's the largest privately run language services firm on the planet. I used to sell language services to the financial industry, the insurance industry. So, if a JP Morgan needs to translate a 100-page document from Japanese to Portuguese, we'll get 10 translators to do it within a day's time. So they can each work on 10 pages. We'll have that document ready for your tomorrow's meeting. We'll even send an interpreter on site. I sold on a B2B level language services. So I have a payment background working in credit card processing. So I knew if we ever needed to create like a marketplace with peer-to-peer payments, I had that background as well. And just, of course, my general passion and knowledge for the product, because I lived through all of these issues and I was like the classic user. So I just needed to find that better half. So I know I'm rambling, but if you want me to tell you how I found him, I can.
So, well, let's talk about how you built the company. You have a sales
Yeah,
background. You have some experience with this peer-to-peer payment system. You have this idea. You build the company. How did you go about? I mean, obviously, first you have to build the UX and the app. Once you had it, how did you sell it to build users and then at some point generate revenue?
sure. And look, I was also a high school Spanish teacher at one point in my early 20s. I have a degree from Cambridge as a certified English language teacher for adults. So I also do have that pedagogical background as well. Um, but as far as just building the actual product, once I found my co-founder in the south of Brazil, I was like, what do we do? How do we get this off the ground? He was moving to Portugal at the time to start another business. He told me um, that if it doesn't work out, he'll let me know. I went back to Rio where I was living. I had an issue in Rio. We don't need to get into the whole story, but I actually got kidnapped for about a 24 to 48 hour experience that was not fun. We don't need to go there, but I'm alive. But after that happened, I said, I'm getting out of Brazil. My mission is Linguado. At the same time, this potential co founder called me from Portugal and said, can you get your butt here? My project is not going to take off. We're not getting off the ground. He had an issue with his business partner because of what happened in Brazil, and I wasn't ready to go back. I was already in the US at this point. I said, yeah, I'll go tomorrow. So I meet him in Portugal. We try and start building in Portugal. He's not a front end mobile app developer. He was more of a web app developer. He was someone more fit to be a CTO, not someone that could build the product. He could help me design it, but not actually write the code to engineer it. So we were looking for talent in Portugal. Portugal had a growing tech scene. They have tech conferences every year. I mean, one of the big ones is they have in Lisbon is Summit. What's it called? Web Summit, right? We were looking for engineers all day. We couldn't find the right people that we were looking for. And then at one point, I was always a big tennis player growing up. I played competitively in Brazil. At one point, I got invited randomly by a couple of Serbian tennis players that saw that I was across the pond. And they said, hey, man, they used to train at a club in Rio. And they said, look, if you're in Europe right now, why don't you go over to Belgrade? You should train at Novak Djokovic's tennis academy in Belgrade. You can train with some of the best athletes that train Novak. And he sold me on the city, Serbia. It's like the women are beautiful. It's really cheap. Tons of digital nomads there. It's growing. The tech community it's a really big climate for it, et cetera, et cetera. I was like, you know what? We're not getting this project off the ground in Portugal. F it. I'll go to, Belgrade for 2 weeks, play some tennis. The first day I get there, I go into a bar with a buddy of mine after going to Novak. I went with another tennis buddy of mine. It was amazing to just be there in the facility, but it's a huge culture shock. I didn't even know Serbian was a Slavic language. The alphabet was Cyrillic. I had little knowledge about the country. As a basketball player, I loved all Yugoslav. So I knew about it through sports mainly, basketball, tennis. But first bar I walk in, amazing music. Everyone is like 7 feet tall, but people are beautiful. My buddy is talking to this girl, and she has a friend sitting at the bar, and her name is Jelena Markovic. She was Miss Serbia 2009. And she was like, well, why are you in Serbia? And I was saying, well, I'm an American guy. I was living in Brazil. I had an idea to build this language app, moved to Portugal, couldn't find good engineers there. Now I'm just here to play tennis. And she's like, you're a very stupid American. And I'm like, it's like, okay, why am I so stupid? She's like, you try to build mobile apps. And you do here, Serbia. We number one, mobile app development. It's like, okay, I didn't know. And she's like, look around. And literally at this party on a Thursday night, there's people actually programming. Like people are dancing, they're drinking Rocky, and then you see people coding at the party with their laptops. It was bizarre and beautiful to see. And then she just reaches into her wallet, hands me a business card. She goes, you must now talk to Milos. Milos, number one mobile app developer of Serbia. You tell him, Yellen, I'll send you. I was like, okay. Next day, I give this guy Milos a call. I told him about the idea. He was on board. And so through him and, other people I was meeting in Belgrade, I started forming a team. It was really ad hoc, but I put a team of engineers around me that could really help build what I was doing. And this was back in 2017. I was telling my co-founder, Italo, in Portugal. And man, something's going on here in Serbia, and I'm not coming back to Portugal. I think you should come here. And so eventually he did. And we started building around with a group of really talented Serbian engineers. Fast forwarding a little bit, the first try did not work out. It oftentimes doesn't. Run into a lot of issues with our technology and trying to build this out. But finally in 2018, I said, you know what? I want to work with a team that already works together, that has the experience rather than adding the pieces myself. I met a guy named Nikola, and Nikola runs a very talented dev shop, as they call it, but agency in Belgrade. And Nikola was really the savior to all the technological glitches and holes that we needed. He became our CTO, our true CTO. He built the framework. He had a team of engineers. We just essentially hired his company to do everything, but he became a part of what we were building, and to this day, even owns shares in what we have. Fast forwarding to present, our team is now in-house. I think the Serbian team was great to start. We got to a million users very quickly within our first year once we launched in late 19, early 2020. When you grow that quick, it gets easy to raise capital, especially during a time like COVID when surprisingly the stock market just went up like this. Investors have a little bit more cash. Valuations were kind of crazy, putting these 20 to 25x multiples on companies that had very little to no revenue. And we fell in that group, right? So, you were asking about like how we grew. Well, I was marketing this thing even before we had launched the product. My friends used to make fun of me because I was kind of traveling around the world, and I was just handing out stickers to people, Linguado stickers. And they're like, "So what are you, a sticker company?" My friends used to make fun of me. I thought you wanted to build an app. I was like, well, man, I'm trying to validate the idea, grow a following first. We got to build the product. But by the time that we had launched, we already had 10,000 plus users ready to try our beta. So we had built a following before the product was created, validating it, marketing it, but it was not done in I'm going to market this online through Facebook or Google Ads. It was blood, sweat, and tears. I went to Serbia, Montenegro, Croatia. I was all over Brazil. I'm looking at the map behind me. Turkey. I was going into the bazaars. I was a workhorse, a walking billboard for the product, and recording as much footage as I could so that by the time we were ready, we would already have users, and we did. That helped. Once we started to raise capital, I said, let's try the invest in ads type of thing. And I remember there was 1 week, like in June, in June, I believe, of 2020, when we did our first Facebook ads campaign, and we were able to onboard users roughly around like 3 to 5 cents. Remember spending less than $2,000 in a week on ads, and we were able to onboard roughly 30,000 users. So it just came down to simple math. We invest this much, we get this much, right? And we also realized that more users we acquired through paid user acquisition, we also had an influx of organic users coming to the platform, right? Our SEO started to increase, users were telling their friends, etc. So we've had the viral effect. We've definitely had it in the Middle East. We've definitely had it in parts in Africa, in tier 2 countries, as we call it. Brazil were huge, Argentina, Colombia. But I just have to say that what's so encouraging now about where we are today is in the last 30 to 60 days, the US, the most expensive and most valuable market on the planet for an app, is now our second most active user base, and we've never run ads in this country. We can run the same ad in a Brazil, and it could cost us 5 cents to onboard that user. In the US, in an oversaturated ad market, especially iPhone users where we spend cash, could cost us $5 to $15 to onboard that same user. So we never wanted to target tier 1 countries like a US, a Canada, Australia, UK, because it costs more. We didn't want to eat into our budget. And my whole framework was, let's onboard the world first. And then when we have the cash, let's invest in the tier one markets. So most of the tier one acquisition has, well, not most, it's all been 100% organic.
And so where are you now with that? And what's your current user base? Your current number of users?
We've had now roughly, I believe, 4.5 million users download the app. We do not pay for user acquisition at the moment. We did a campaign recently, just to test things again, but we really haven't done it in years. Before I get into the numbers, I just want to say
Mm.
we had a 2-year rebuild. So when I left Serbia and I knew that I wanted to get an in-house team, have my own engineers working with me, not kind of outsourcing, um, we had a 2-year rebuild where we were kind of figuring out where to give the tech to. So I worked with American engineers. I'd worked with another group of, Brazilian engineers. Now finally we have the right in-house team. But during that process, we did lose a ton of users. We lost a ton of users because there were issues with our technology. We had to refactor some stuff. We also changed our front end code base. And rather than two separate code bases for iOS and Android, we shifted to one because we knew if we wanted to scale and move quicker and also economize, it'd be cheaper and quicker to do it that way. So having said that, right now we're getting back to roughly 250,000 monthly active users. I am expecting an injection of capital this month where if, we raise what I'm looking for, we could jump to 25 million users by the end of this year alone. That'll depend on, of course, if I get the money that I'm seeking. But my position for the last 2 years was creating a perfect product so that users never leave. Because it's very easy for us to onboard users, but most companies will tell you and that build products, you want them to stay. And we did have a retention issue for a while simply because we had some bugs on the platform and things we needed to fix. Now everything is perfect. We worked 2 years to make a perfect app that doesn't have any sort of technological issues. We never want that to be a reason why a user leaves. I'd rather it be because they don't like the app, not because something's not working for them.
So you were able to test and iterate in real time, get the app where you need. Um, you put advertising on pause for a while or haven't needed it because you've had organic growth. If you get influx of capital, do you think you'll start ads again, running ads again?
100%. I mean, you can't spend money you don't have. We just ran out of runway. I raised $1 million for our first round. We valued the company at $9 million pre-money, 10 post. We had no revenue at the time, but we got our we were backed by a VC. We had some really strategic investors put money in our seed round. Our growth numbers were astonishing. We had users. Our platform had almost 500,000 messages sent per day, daily on the platform. There was some months our average is between 450,000 to 600,000 messages sent per day. So when you have a really active platform, you know, it's it, it's easy to value your company at a higher price because we hadn't figured out monetization yet or how we were going to do it. But if you looked at all the other businesses that raised capital in the ed tech space during the time that we did, their valuations were much higher, but they never had the type of growth numbers and activity that they did. They just chose to start monetizing early. We said, let's grow. We'll figure out monetization later. We don't care at this point. But of course, at some point, you got to pay the bills. Once you have investors, they need a return. You got to start making money. You can't be a free app forever, even though some companies do live by that business model. But we just didn't have the financing or funding to do that. So, it's always a catch 22. Like if you put ads on your platform, you could earn more revenue, but you don't want to scare users away. So they leave, So we decided to gamify ads. Okay. Watch this ad and you get this premium access, or you can buy our pro version. What we have now is a freemium model. The app is free for everybody. We do offer a premium app with premium services for users that pay. So we have a subscription model, 1 month, 3 month. We have a free trial as well. You can try our premium app. We convert a lot of users that way. We do have ads on the platform, um, but we're building out other business models. And one of the things that we would like to build at some point is, one of the reasons I want to enter this sharing economy space isn't just so we can make money. It's just so if you're a doctor from Brazil, you're a lawyer from Afghanistan, you're a surgeon, right, in Turkey, but you come to the US, those degrees don't translate, pun intended, across borders. They generally, people, very talented, smart people with degrees and true careers in their home country, if they come to the US, they start driving Uber. They walk dogs. They deliver food, DoorDash, right? Uber Eats. They'll do anything to make an extra buck until like they can be a doctor or a lawyer in this country, which it's going to take a ton of time. No one wants to go back to school, but that's kind of the problem, with world economy, is that you can be so incredibly talented, but if you live in an impoverished country and you're educated, I mean, you can make more money as an Uber driver in the US than you can as a surgeon in pretty much every country in Africa. And it's really sad to see that. So I also wanted to give people, our users, a way to make extra money, right? And so Uber, Airbnb, these sharing economies have bought into that. I want people to also make money on the platform, just being able to teach, tutor, interpret, translate, or just offering a conversation. We want communication to be free for everyone, but if there is an opportunity there and we see it, because a big portion of our user base are actually people that work in the language space, they come to the app looking for clients.
Hmm.
They get them, but they bring them off the platform so they can do Zoom classes offline with multiple students. Maybe it's a translation service, whatever it is. So we want to build out the infrastructure with video, group chat, which we're doing, so that you can do that within the platform, and we'll take a percentage on those transactions from buyers and sellers. We'll have our own internal economy, a checks and balance system, SEO. Good teachers move up, bad teachers move down, just like, again, like an Airbnb. If you know, you pay for an apartment, it's crappy when you get there, you're not going to get good reviews. You won't be able to continue to rent it. So we're following a similar model. We just haven't built that out yet, but it's something we plan to do.
And those users who want to make money are incentivized, presumably, to have a premium subscription, I assume.
Yeah, we haven't defined the business model completely. I'm sure we would integrate that into the app where if they want to be a user that's monetized, we call it monetize your tongue, the MYT
Mm,
model, right? If they want to monetize their tongue, then maybe they have to pay a fee to be a part of that program.
mm.
Um, but we were just thinking in terms of those transactions. But yes, most likely when we start developing the business model in more depth, we will do that. We just wanted to finish building the technological pieces first. So we actually should have video calls finish this week. We had them in the past, but now, because again, with our rebuild, we're using a third party technology for that. Group chats is something that else we're also building out this week, so that users, if I'm a teacher, I want to have all my own students in my private group chat, I'll pay for it and I'll be able to do that as well.
Mm. So it sounds like you really will have already, and will have more multiple revenue streams from uh, companies that you're partnering with, opportunities for people on the platform to make money, paid subscribers. Um, Sounds like the model has many different revenue streams.
We even implemented we actually started working with a games company this week. We're doing a rev share with the games company. A lot of the games don't have anything to do with language and culture. So we're probably going to scrap a lot of them, but we're exploring anything, any and all. I will say is the life of the look, the point of this podcast has to deal with ed tech leaders, right? So, you know, uh, all of my, every single thing that I've done with creating this product, it's user first. But I think any founder is going to reach a point if they've taken money from investors, they have to say, your user's still the most important, but you really want to give your investors a return. So you have to, like, no one likes ads. No one wants to see ads on anything, but you have to make some pennies along the way, even if it'll somewhat diminish the user experience, right? It really depends on how much we have in the tank. And many founders, they raise capital, they spend it all. Then they have to raise capital again, and they spend it all. You need to generate revenue in the process, even if it might be somewhat disadvantageous for the user or somewhat tarnish the user experience. And so you're always juggling by, okay, can we gamify this feature or this ad? Um, you know, like investors want to see this. Users don't care about that. They just want a great experience. So it's always a balancing act.
I mean, these days users are used to with a freemium model for there to be ads unless they pay a subscription. I mean,
Yeah,
so
I mean, it is more obviously. It's more mainstream today. I'd say if we were pumping revenue through other means, we would scrap the ads.
mm,
But we also see, for example, we've gotten deeper into the travel, the travel part of our app by creating this whole discover section. So we just also see a huge opportunity, and we actually partnered with Expedia on Friday so that we can, okay, you look at Brazil, you're checking out Rio, you want to know how to get there. Well, now you'll be able to book flights through Linguado. You'll find out, through hotels.com, which is an Expedia partner, or through a Verbo, or through Expedia itself. You'll be able to book stays through Linguado. Where again, it's also just so users never have to leave the app, but also for us to generate revenue because Expedia will pay us for every click and if stuff gets booked. So, you know, the monetization thing, you don't need and this is something I'll recommend for all founders. Like, you need users first. The monetization stuff, if you have the luxury, you figure out as you go because the way the users act and how they operate on your platform is your key to creating the right monetization paths.
absolutely. Where from here? Sounds like you're building out lots of new parts of the app, new features, new relationships. What's the big picture? What's the next 6 months look like for you?
Well, I need to put together our next funding round. So I have to make a decision if it's going to be a pre A or Series A. If you do that, we have to make sure it's at the right price. You know, I don't want to raise capital at a valuation that may not be advantageous for myself, for people that are already on the cap table. So we have to find what that number is. I know that a higher number of value for this company comes with growth. So I need to raise. So I'm to kind of have. So it's kind of on the investing side. It's kind of on the investor relations side. That's where my head really is. My team knows what we need to build in terms of product, but I need to structure the next round. Really understand how much money we need, at what price, what it's going to be used for. But I'll tell you this right now: is we've cut our expenses tenfold with the advent of AI. Um, I've had some layoffs, unfortunately. So our engineering core is even smaller than what it was, but it's much more talented, much more tight knit. We're utilizing, the latest and greatest AI tools so that I mean, even with we had crash rates on certain devices in certain parts of the world that were very low end devices. But we had a lot of users in, let's say, China, um, where Facebook, Google can't do any marketing. We have users there. They're using VPNs to download our app. But a lot of these low end devices they use in China or parts of Asia started having issues. Like at some point, you have to evaluate: do we want to build our tech so that it's compatible on some of these very, very low end Android devices? Or do we just kind of say, F it, it's not worth it for us to cater to every single device on the planet? One thing that we did do, and this is a good thing about the founder communities, founders talk to one another. And there's another CTO I really respect that I help his business, he helps mine. He told us to add a tool that can check and diagnose bugs that happen in real time on every single user's device on the planet. So we'll see there's an issue. We're able to diagnose it quicker, and then we can make decisions faster. That's help us create a better product and make product decisions and where to really, you know, uh, add our time. And I think as a technological team, we can't do everything. We have to prioritize what makes most sense for our user base and what's going to generate the most revenue for us. So we've done a lot of the things. We're going to continue to do those things. But on my side, I really need to focus on the investor relations piece because when I start raising capital, it's going to be a full-time job. Right now, we have an open bridge round. It's kind of been a way to, keep the lights on, extend runway. But I'm really looking for capital right now to inject into growth so we can have an explosive Series A at a nice valuation. That's my mission.
Cool. Thank you so much. For those who want to know about you, linguado.com, right? You see it on your shirts.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
We'll have a new website up maybe as soon as this week. Linguado.com. If you want to learn more about it, of course, our Instagram is Linguado. My social media is Alex_Linguado. But yeah, download the app, check it out. We're available on every device. We're in the App Store, Play Store, Linguado.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming, Alex.
Appreciate your time, Oliver. Thank you for having me.